Hi, today we're going to work on a whole series of information about how to be resilient during the pandemic and during life. All of us, we're here, we're making it through somehow, but resilience is being able to make it through and come out and be strong. So I have myself some notes here today to make sure I don't forget any of the points, but this is going to be 8 different topics. I'm going to present them in a particular order, but you don't need to watch them in any particular order. You could watch them all at once, you could watch them one at a time, and you can just pick which ones are most relevant to you. The topics that we're going to cover are ways to adjust your thought patterns, how to give yourself affirmations to help yourself be more pandemic resilient, decluttering your space and your brain, cutting down on decision fatigue, practicing gratitude and considering your successes, some ways to be happier right now, using meditation and visualization to your benefit, and the last one is aiming for just 1% better. So those are going to be all of the topics that we're going to cover, but the first one is ways to adjust your thought patterns. So just keep in mind that what fires together wires together. So what I mean by that is when you think something in your brain has to follow a neural pathway in order to have that thought connect and make meaning to you. If that thought continues to connect each time it fires, it continues to make a path a little bit stronger, a little bit stronger. This is why rehearsal helps. This is why studying your notes helps. This is why all of those things. Practicing helps, because when you have a thought, when you do a behavior, that practice helps to lay down that pathway. The problem is that when you are laying down a pathway of negative thoughts, you're reinforcing and making that negative pathway stronger, and that's not always true. One of the things that everybody does is that they talk to themselves. This is one of the fundamental tenets of cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, which is a very common and a very well-researched type of intervention to help people with different behaviors like depression, anxiety, obsessive compulsive disorder. The idea behind that is that the thoughts that you have will contribute to the behaviors that you do, and that by changing your patterns of thought, you will then be better able to change your patterns of behavior. So, all of us are wired to be thinking these negative thoughts. So it's not just you. All of us are wired to be thinking the negative thoughts. And that makes sense, because if you think back to when we had to survive, it was okay if you remembered where there was a good water source or where this happy thing happened. That was great. But it was really terrible if you forgot where the danger was. So your brains are wired to remember where the danger is, what are the things you have to watch out for. That's just how we're wired. Now, we don't have to worry about that immediate danger like, the bear so much, but our brains are still wired in order to keep ourselves safe. And that's why it's much easier to get into these negative thought patterns than it is to get into the positive ones. However, the things that we tell ourselves are not always true. When you have that negative thought pattern, one of the first things you can do is just recognize it. So you say to yourself, this is terrible, I'm stupid, I made the wrong decision there, I did the wrong thing, I can never do that. All of that makes sense. You're talking to yourself, doesn't mean you're crazy, it means you're human. And it also makes sense that those negative thought patterns would be pretty common, but are they really true? Now, one of the things that also goes along with cognitive behavioral therapy is that there are certain cognitive fallacies. That means incorrect ways that we think about these things. And one of the first is to believe the things that we say to ourselves. Now, I already said you've taken the first step by just thinking or paying attention to the thoughts that you're giving yourself. So the next thing I want you to pay attention to is if you had a friend who were telling you those things that you're saying to yourself, do you think you'd still be friends with them? Do you think that you would hang out with somebody who was constantly telling you you did that wrong, you're stupid, you're not going to make it, this is terrible? Probably not. So why are you going to let yourself talk to yourself that way? So when you find yourself in one of these negative thought patterns, first of all, say, okay, Am I going to accept this from myself? Yes or no? The next thing you can do is to kind of challenge it and say, is it true? If I think, oh, that was stupid, I do this all the time. Okay, is it really true that you do it all the time? Or is it true that maybe sometimes you make a mistake and there's also times when you do things that are well? That same thing can happen if you're feeling anxious. You say, I'm going to get COVID, or my family's going to get sick and somebody's going to die. Okay, is that true? It could be true, but it's just as likely that it's not true. So a lot of times you can help yourself by challenging yourself when you find yourself making those mistakes. So there's a lot more that we could discuss about these cognitive behavioral fallacies that people have and patterns that they get into. But I think that just to keep in mind, one, to recognize when you're talking to yourself. Two, to decide, are you really being fair to yourself, and to challenge yourself when the things that you're telling yourself are not true. The next topic we're going to talk about are being able to use affirmations or positive thoughts and how to help strengthen these in your brain. And we'll talk about that next time.